Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to
Carvana.
Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. And as your vacation maximizationer, I'm going to make sure you hear the maximum sizzle of Comfort Inn's free hot breakfast. Let's get real close. Maximum apple. Now that's fresh crispimization. Maximum waffle. Hear that crunch. And that's maximum coffee. Oh yeah, that's the pour I'm talking about. Breakfast maximized before hitting the road. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Hi, welcome to IKEA.
This is my college campus.
Correct, but I see you're on IKEA.com ordering some college items.
My daughter's room is pretty bare. We need a lamp, some comfy pillows, her favorite stuffy.
Dad!
With pickup options, we've got what you need to conveniently order IKEA. Literally anywhere.
Sweet. More time for gaming.
And studying. Wait, where are you going now?
Got to show the ultimate Frisbee team how easy it is to order from IKEA. Get IKEA whenever, wherever, however you want. Choose from thousands of pickup locations, affordable delivery options, and more.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Earn 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at Polestar.com.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Jessica Childress, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. Where are you joining us from today?
I am actually in Mexico today, but I am based in Washington, D.C. I am the managing attorney of the Childress firm. We're a boutique employment law firm based in Washington, D.C., and we offer employment counseling to individuals. We also offer anti-harassment trainings to companies, as well as internal investigation services to companies when there is an employee who has brought an allegation forth against the company.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Yeah, and that really leads into our topic for today. We're going to be talking about how to report workplace misconduct, including discrimination, harassment, bullying, all of those sorts of negative behaviors. How do you go about doing that in an effective and productive way, especially when it's scary? You know, if you're experiencing those things, you know, you're worried about retaliation, you're worried about how it's going to impact you, how you're going to be perceived, etc. So we're going to try to unpack that and have some good ideas and tips for how the audience can approach that. And I would also add, because many of the audience are people leaders, you know, how can you create an environment within your team where people can feel safe to come forward with reporting if something happens? You want to have that kind of safe environment. You know, the level of toxicity that often exists within teams that then results in not only bad behaviors, but the inability for us to actually report things and resolve things. That's what we want to avoid. As we get started, I wanted to share Jessica's bio with everybody. Jessica Childress is the author of Peace, Leaving a Toxic Workplace on Your Own Terms. She has practiced employment law for over 11 years, representing organizations of all sizes and individuals in employment law matters. She's the managing attorney of the Childress firm, as she mentioned, in the Washington, D.C. area. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government and African American Studies from the University of Virginia and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia School of Law. Jessica, anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
No, John, I think you've covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's start with.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
How do you know when it's time to leave your workplace? You've experienced things that aren't very positive, but we also know, you know, grass isn't always greener. So just because you've experienced something you don't like at your workplace doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be better somewhere else. But like, where's the line? Like, how do you know if you're just experiencing things that are annoying, frustrating versus like real misconduct, real discrimination, harassment, bullying, especially if the organization doesn't seem willing to respond or change or fix anything?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. So it's important to remember that the employment laws that protect employees in the workplace, they don't typically protect employees from simple disputes in the workplace that arise out of bad management or that arise from bad managers. So workplace incivilities, micromanaging, even a manager that could be a yeller or just a really hard person to work with, that's not an unlawful act in the workplace. The law doesn't have any remedy to protect an employee in that particular circumstance. The law protects a very limited category of behavior. It prohibits a limited category of behavior. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of protected categories. And the major protected categories are race, color, religion, sex, national origin, sexual orientation, pregnancy status. Those are the federally protected categories. And states have their own set of laws that may go beyond what the federal law protects. And so when we talk about discrimination, there in DC, where I practice in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. DC, for example, protects 23 protected categories. Personal appearance is protected. That's not protected in Virginia, just across the river. And so it's important to remember that you have to, as an employee, to understand what constitutes unlawful discrimination. You know, we can throw the term out there, like, John, if I say I don't like your, sweatshirt because it has, a blue seal on it. In DC, that actually might be unlawful. In Virginia, that's not. And so employees should educate themselves on what actually is protected where they work. So that's the first step in order to understand if you're really experiencing unlawful discrimination. Unlawful harassment that is severe under the federal law, that's severe or pervasive misconduct that would unreasonably interfere with the terms and conditions of your workplace. And it has to be based on a protected category. So understanding what the protected categories are in your jurisdiction is really paramount to understanding whether there's actually been an unlawful violation. Because we can throw the terms around when I conduct consultations with employee clients, they may feel as though they're being discriminated. But if we can't identify a protected class, then that's not going to be unlawful discrimination. Harassment, that's also what's called a term of art. Retaliation. That's what's called a term of art in the law. And it's very formulaic. You have to have one protected activity. So that means a report, and we'll talk about reporting in just a few minutes. But you have to have an actual report of some violation of law. And it can be an oral report, it can be an informal report, but there has to be some engagement of you actually raising a violation of some misconduct in the workplace. And then there actually has to be adverse action that follows your protected activity. And those two those have to happen pretty close in time. There's something called temporal proximity in the law. And so if those two elements don't exist, if you don't have protected activity plus some adverse action that follows, that's not retaliation. And so if you believe that your employer doesn't invite you out to lunch with your colleagues, and they don't like you because, I'm going to use this is a very simple example again, they don't like you because you always wear a hoodie with a blue seal on it. That, in DC, that might be discrimination on the basis of personal appearance. I'm going to use the example of Virginia again. There's no protected activity there. You haven't raised any report. If you haven't raised a report to a superior or to some external body, there's no protected activity. And if no adverse action has followed, there's no retaliation. So it's sometimes frustrating for employees because the law is so formulaic, and these are conversations that you probably are, this is just an education that you might not be privy to unless you are in the HR space, you're in the compliance space, or you've been really attentive during your anti-harassment trainings. But to really understand what constitutes a violation of law, the education piece is just so very important to really understand what the terrain of employment law is, so that you can understand whether you're actually experiencing a violation of law or whether you're experiencing just incivility in the workplace that unfortunately is not protected unless it meets these very strict legal elements.
Yeah. And just to highlight, I think it's been pretty explicit in what you've been sharing. You're talking about very legal interpretations, definitions, laws, how they vary federal versus individual states or municipalities that have different protections for different categories. And you're distinguishing between perhaps incivility, simply bad management, bad leadership, versus some of these protected areas. It is worth noting that ultimately, you're not locked into an employment status with an employer. So if you're unhappy because there's micromanagement, you're unhappy with the style of the organization, the culture, you're unhappy, you feel like your boss is a yeller. Like, there may not be legal recourse in terms of discrimination, bullying, whatever. You do have the decision to make. Do you want to stay in that environment? Do you feel like you can help change things? That's perhaps a different conversation than really what we're trying to focus on today. But I did just want to call that out, that, ultimately, I don't want anyone to feel like they're, to use the kind of the parallel circumstance of like being in an abusive relationship. Like, if you feel like you're in a place that doesn't value you, where you don't have the opportunity to bring your whole self to work and contribute in meaningful ways, and you feel like there's bad relationships all around you, and you have a micromanaging boss and blah, 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 like all the things, if you feel like it's a negative environment and you don't want to be there, by all means, you can make that choice to leave. And in some cases, I would absolutely encourage people to make that choice. Like, don't stick around in an abusive type of environment. That said, as I said at the outset, the grass isn't always greener, and every organization has its stuff. Every organization has issues, and sometimes it's a little bit of the rainbow unicorn, trying to find that organization that's gonna check every single box for exactly how you want your organization to be. So with that as a caveat, to this conversation, let's explore more now a little bit. If we can determine that, yes, we have something, we're aware enough of the law, we have something that is in violation of one of these protected categories, behavior that's inappropriate, and now you want to move into the place of reporting. You've decided that you're not just leaving. That's honestly, that's what leads to a lot of underreporting of these types of behaviors, is because a lot of times people just, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to report it to HR. I don't want to have to do XYZ. I don't want to have to go through an investigation. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to go somewhere else. But let's assume you've decided you're going to stay. You think it can be improved. You think it can be resolved. How do we start the process of reporting these actions, like you said, is necessary to, really start the ball rolling?
To your point, John, you don't necessarily have to stay unless you have an employment agreement. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But most people are at will. Most non-C-suite executives are at will. They don't have a term of employment. And so if you decide that you do want to, in fact, stay at the organization, it's really important that you create an environment that is comfortable and psychologically safe for yourself. And that does require the very courageous step of reporting. And John, you mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, that it does take courage to report misconduct. No one wants to believe that they're, a complainer. Everyone wants to feel like they are a team player, but there is no shame in reporting. And most companies have an employment handbook. There is usually, when you start working at a company, you typically do acknowledge receiving a set of guidelines that govern your employment. And it's not a contract. Typically, those handbooks will say at the beginning of the handbook that this is not an employment agreement, but it still is a code of conduct that governs or that dictates the culture of the company. It's I used to work in large law firms, and I've done a number of employment agreements. I've reviewed and created a number of employment agreements, so I am very familiar with what those say. And I have never created an employment agreement that doesn't have a reporting policy. So to report misconduct, and that misconduct always includes harassment, retaliation, and discrimination. And so it's important to if you feel as though there is some sort of misconduct going on within the company, even if it's not unlawful, even if you don't think that it relates to a protected category, if you do feel like you're being bullied, usually companies still have in their employment manuals some provision and some protocol for reporting bullying or uncivil conduct, because companies typically want to go beyond what the law requires. They want to create great cultures, not just a compliance culture. And so that those policies typically require that you report the behavior to a supervisor. If the supervisor is the bad actor in your case, there typically is a protocol for you to report to some external body, maybe someone who is a higher level supervisor who supervises your supervisor, or there may be some external body, some hotline that you can report the misconduct to. But there's typically some way to report. So you should determine what that mechanism is and follow that mechanism, because it's there for you to use. Because companies understand that when there is a bad actor, it can really ruin the entire morale of the company. So you're actually doing the company a favor by letting them know that there is some cultural deficit within the organization. There's something that's happening here that's creating a morale issue, and that's hurting the culture of the organization. So you reporting it will typically lead to some investigation so that the behavior can be addressed.
Yeah. So while it does take courage to report, because you never quite know, I think generally there's a growing level of distrust and mistrust in institutions in our society today. And so, I totally get it. Like you may feel like you've been experiencing these negative things. You're like, people must know about it, but they're looking the other way. They're letting it go on anyways. And so then you think, oh, I have to go report it through the organization's HR department or whatever system. Are they really going to pay attention? Are they really going to give me fair opportunity to share? Are they really going to do anything about it? And there's a lot of distrust. So I totally get that. It takes courage to do this, and it takes commitment. I mean, I see this as like, if someone's really committed to the organization, they're more likely to report misbehavior. If they're not committed, they're probably more likely to just leave, to cut and run and say, I'm not dealing with this. But sometimes we say dissent within the organization is a threat, and we discourage people from dissenting or from reporting because that somehow is a sign of disloyalty. I think there is 100% loyal dissent. You need, like, people who are really committed to the organization will understand the long-term impacts of these types of negative behaviors, and they will do the uncomfortable thing, the necessary thing of calling it out, reporting it, and making sure that it stops for not just them, but for their coworkers and for the future of the organization. So anyways, I appreciate how you've laid all of that out. I think that's super important for us to consider. So let's assume for a moment, let's take an example of workplace bullying. Let's say that you feel like you've been experiencing workplace bullying. It's more than just, little passing, discomfort or frustration. You really feel like you have a case to be made. Walk us through how you might start to address that from your perspective to deal with this workplace misconduct in a productive way.
Sure. There is nothing comfortable about being bullied, and it doesn't matter if it's an unlawful bullying, someone continuing to scrutinize your work for no reason, just rumors about you being spread within the organization, whatever form of bullying you can envision, even if it's not based on a protected class. That doesn't make the behavior more comfortable. So if you're experiencing bullying, you should report that misconduct in the same way that you would report any other misconduct, such as discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. And so there is, just as I mentioned earlier, go back to that reporting policy, look at that employee handbook, because companies don't want bullies. they can address the behavior with the bad actor. And if you feel comfortable, I think it's easy for me to say as an advocate to, just tell the bully that you don't feel comfortable with X thing that they said or did. But I think that's much harder to do in practice. And even in my life, if someone has said something that is rude, it's hard for me to, even though I am an advocate, it's hard for me to say that was really rude. So I think it's harder to engage in that direct conflict. But if you feel comfortable, sending an email, maybe letting them know that this thing happened, this thing was said, and this is how the behavior made you feel. It's important because sometimes a person just doesn't know that their behavior is being perceived as bullying or is being experienced as bullying. And so letting that person know is very important. You're speaking up to let them know that the behavior is unreasonable is critical to addressing the behavior. But that act of speaking up is actually the hardest part for the employee, because it does take a level of, number one, really conceptualizing, is this bad? Is this good? Or not, is this good? Is this really that bad? I think that's the question that we often ask ourselves. Is this really enough for me to actually say something? But if you know that you are continuing to analyze the behavior, you're going home with the behavior, you're thinking about it, you can't sleep, you dread going to work, this person really is changing your workplace experience, then it is time to say something, because that behavior may not just be affecting you. It really could, to your point, John, it could be affecting other people within the organization. And there is, the phenomenon of, bystanders maybe not saying anything because they think someone else will actually say something. So someone actually has to speak, and there's nothing wrong with multiple people speaking. But if you can remember that you're doing the organization and your colleagues a favor by making the organization better and not tolerating behavior that's making people uncomfortable.
Yeah. Let's say you're getting to the point where you're really seriously considering whether to stay or leave. What would you say are some of the critical key elements and items you should really be considering at that decision point?
Many items that you should consider, and I have a checklist, John, that I can share with you for your show notes. But some of the key items are: one, do I have an employment agreement? So do I have an employment agreement that requires me to stay for a certain period of time? Do I have to give notice before I leave? What does that notice entail? How many days? By how many days do I have to give notice before I leave? But again, if you're not a C-suite executive, you likely don't have an employment agreement. I would say, if we talked maybe 3 months ago, that you would have to consider a non-compete agreement, whether you have a non-competition agreement. But the Federal Trade Commission has ruled or has issued regulations that non-compete agreements are essentially unenforceable going forward. And so that's at this point obsolete. But nonetheless, those regulations may be overruled by a court at some point. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it's important to keep in the back of your mind that you should still be checking into non-competes and what restrictive covenants you have that could restrict your ability to work somewhere else after you leave the organization. You should also consider where you live. Do you have industry? Is your industry where you live? Do you work remotely? Do you have the opportunity to work remotely? Do you have to move in order to find new employment? Do you have dependents that are relying on you for income? What about health insurance? Are you covered by your partner? Do you have the funds to self-insure or to get COBRA coverage? So those are all very real considerations before making the jump to decide, that you're going to leave that day. So sometimes it is time to leave immediately. And I do think that if you can do this, prioritize your well-being. Nonetheless, there are sometimes these conflicting and very important considerations to make, especially if you are a parent, a caregiver, thinking about, those costs that do come with leaving your organization.
Yeah, all very well said. Jessica, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. You walked us through, I think, some really important points to consider if we're experiencing these sorts of things. And as I said at the beginning as well, hopefully, even if you're listening or watching this, and even if you're not experiencing these things, hopefully you're thinking about your teams and you're thinking about how can I create a more psychologically safe environment? How can I create a healthy environment for my workers, and so they feel safe to report, so that we can get better, so that we can improve and make sure that we are a place where people want to be, where they can bring their whole authentic selves to the workplace, where they can contribute in meaningful ways, where they can be engaged and help us to accomplish great things. That's what we all want. And so if we can proactively create that environment, the number of these types of incidents will decrease. And then when they do happen, people will have faith and trust that it will be resolved, that you will not bury your head in the sand, that you won't pretend like it didn't happen, but you'll actually do something about it. And I think ultimately that's what we all want. Jessica, as we wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's truly been a pleasure to speak with you this morning. So thank you very much for listening to your audience. You can keep up with me by connecting with me on LinkedIn. I'm Jessica Childress on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook. My firm is on Facebook, The Childress Firm, and we're also on Instagram at The Childress Firm. So please feel free to connect with me on those platforms.
Wonderful. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Jessica and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Have a great
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.